Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in. My name is Gino Robair, and I want to share with you my research into real-time graphic score production through papermaking and letterpress printing. It's a form of score creation that, as part of a performance, yields an object that not only reflects what has previously happened, but serves as a form of inspiration for participants to pull from as the performance continues. The materialization of an object score, a newly made paper sculpture or a printed surface, is integrated into the performance through interaction with other participants using techniques such as game structures, text prompts, and role play that performing artists in other disciplines utilize when improvising. Papermaking and printing are typically referred to as craft-based arts rather than performance arts, but like musicians, dancers, and actors, papermakers and printers rely on embodied knowledge. There is a choreography involved in both practices that requires simultaneous attention to the interaction of different parts of the body with various tools and how everything must be in conversation with the environment within which it is present in that moment. I've been developing ways in which papermakers and printers can interact with any artist in ways that are conversational, the kind of improvisatory dialogue we are used to experiencing with dancers in contact improv and musicians who play jazz. As an improviser and composer, I've thought a lot about how the two approaches to music making can align, this approach of composition and improvisation. So rather than trying to define the two words or to rigorously delineate them, my approach has been to find what is common or confusing between them and to explore this gray area and see what it suggests. The work I will show you looks at score creation from scratch, that is, to make the paper and inscribe it as part of a performance. In other words, not just use these two craft processes to transcribe what is happening in a performance, but to integrate them into an interactive process between other artists and their materials. To help you understand what led me here, I will begin with a brief demonstration of how I approach my materials as a percussionist, where I consider what each object suggests on its own and what it suggests when putting it into conversation with some other object. Musicians use the term extended techniques as a way to categorize so-called non-traditional ways for playing an instrument, such as putting a screw between the strings of the piano to prepare it. By its very nature, the universe of percussion does not have the strict boundaries that other instruments have, those that have century-old traditions, such as the violin or the oboe or the sitar. I approach every object as having the potential of being a percussion instrument, and I've focused my practice on exploring this potential, usually for the first time in a performance in front of an audience. To me, this is the closest you can get to completely free improvisation, to meet with and converse with your materials for the very first time on stage or while recording. And that's what led me to use the printing press such as this one I've been showing you here, which is a Washington press, as well as to dip my hands into the world of papermaking. So my interest was to learn how to play the drums without actually hitting them, find alternate ways to make sound with the drums where I wasn't just hitting them in one way that we practice a lot. So first of all, I looked at the EBow and I thought, well, the EBow is a very useful item because it can play any kind of piece of metal. This is off of the streets from a street sweeping device, and we can put it on top of there, and it plays, and the drum becomes an amplifier. And so I found that I could use the drums not only as tables but as secondary resonators. I could put a cymbal on it upside down. It would make the cymbal louder. I could put a piece of junk metal on it. I also found that I could turn the snare drum over and play the snares themselves with the EBow. Like that. So that was a nice thing, because I could have a sustained sound without having to play a roll, and I could sustain the sound by itself without any human intervention, so that I could use my hands and my feet for something else. Then I began to experiment with toys. I have this squiggle wiggle writer, which is you put a pen in there to make squiggles, but it's also my duet partner when it works. It bounces around. Instant duet partner. And somebody gave me a nice drink mixer.
which has a sound that can blend really well with saxophones and other kinds of reed instruments. And then I have a turkey call, for example. A lot of these things were gifts, so I just collect gifts or I steal the toys from my children. Traditional turkey call. And then another thing I've found that, is that using a horn, this is an old bicycle horn I had since I was 6 years old, I can just press it onto the drum and it couples and it makes a nice sustained sound, and then each sound has harmonics that come out based on how hard I blow. I can do that on timpani, bass drums, floor toms, etc., etc. So really to get away from always hitting with the sticks and find different ways. And I like the things like this or like this or like this that not only play by themselves but are somewhat autonomous and will do things that I hadn't really planned. And they surprise me and keep me moving and continually make me happy because one loves surprises like birthday presents and things.
That brings us back to the idea of taking an improvisational approach to papermaking. The ultimate goal is not to create a perfectly formed sheet of paper. Rather, it is to develop approaches to papermaking that allow for creative interplay, modeled after those used in traditional performing arts, such as music, dance, and theater. And I'm looking for ways that the materials themselves suggest performativity so that papermakers can interact with each other or with artists working in other disciplines, rather than being a part of a sort of parallel play process. This approach asks participants to focus on the process, to foreground intentionality, full sensory awareness, and the ongoing dialogue, rather than on any finished product or artifact. Participants are asked to deeply consider the process of working with the materials and the dialogue it opens up with them. It also asks for the same attention from any collaborators. In this demonstration, we use prompts to encourage different ways of interacting within an improvisation. Okay, pending, let's see. I was thinking about just letting it, let's see what I get. Okay, pending. This prompt slow changes gave Gun the idea to combine two different mold sizes and mold shapes together. You can see that she's actually double dipping the triangular mold in order to get a thicker piece of paper. On this particular day, we allowed ourselves to move slowly while we were improvising. So with this prompt, she allowed herself to carefully consider what she wanted to do in order to interpret the prompt. And rather than think about it ahead of time, to let the material inspire her as she was working. So in this case, you'll see that she's going to add this red triangular piece onto the rectangular piece. And what's interesting to see at this point is when she couches it to the larger sculpture, the view of it you see now will change, because once it goes down onto the felt, you will now see a portion of the paper that was against the screen, the red sort of poking through the semi-transparent white. And then she's going to modify it further by squirting it with water, which is a common technique to sort of disrupt a newly couched page. But in this case, it's part of her interpretation of the prompt. Slow changes.
Yes. She's in her back in her old.
See, can you get this as well, or is that too
yes,
far away?
maybe. I see
Yeah.
where the. It's here, isn't it? It's a kind of corner because it's broken here.
Yes, exactly.
And that's beautiful. Put it a little bit more there, I think. So it lifts up some air between.
Did you really think about how the paper, the visually changes when it dries this much before?
No. I don't.
I mean, this is
I just do.
yeah, but I mean, I think in my regular, maybe in your practice too, but in my regular practice, it's going to look so much different tomorrow, and I'm not used to that.
No,
I kind of like
because it's good enough as it is.
Yeah, because I like to be able to see through here, but this pine that we're using is going to be so opaque that it'll just be a different piece tomorrow.
Maybe it's more boring, and the red is quite different tomorrow, I think too. It's more too pink.
Yeah.
Maybe, but we put more pulp in it.
It might
Pure
be different.
red pulp, so we see. It's part of the material, I think. And it's a part of the learning, because if I want this transparency, I have to use some other fibers.
Right, you have to use the colors.
If you have planned to have this.
Right.
But this is not planned in that way, so it has to have its own life.
So we're still in conversation.
Still.
It's going to have the last word in the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think this difference between the white and the red here is going to be, it's just going to be a different thing tomorrow.
They'll be more calm tomorrow.
Yeah.
Probably, we don't know.
That's true. We'll see.
Maybe something fell out. They'll be more quiet.
Just want to see what happens when we...
I was already one step further. It's thin.
At this point, we would remove the dried page, whatever happened in the sculpture, from the cotton piece on which we couched it. You can hear that it makes a really lovely sound. In fact, the process of paper making has a number of interesting sounds. For example, when you pull the mold out of the water, you can hear it dripping. All this, of course, can be utilized in a performance. But this process of removing the score, or what has become the score, from the cotton is interesting in a number of ways. Ultimately, you end up modifying the score that you've created because parts of the edges stick to whatever it was you couched it on. So this process is part of the score creation. And in performance in a real-time setting, all of this could be considered as part of a larger performative aspect of the event. Well, that's interesting. You got it that far. The back has really got some interesting little pieces of blue in there.
This was the harsh.
Yeah.
This was your harsh attack. And you can see the
Yes.
a little bit of the harsh trace.
It's a strong move.
It's like this is actually a beautiful.
Yes.
And there's your subtle.
To see what's left.
Yeah.
It's also a mark in another way.
Yes. No, exactly.
But you can't see it in the light, you can?
Yeah, you can. Mm-hmm. Faint, that's what it was. So this is a faint image of the previous one. I like that.
Mm.
This is a Vandercook proofing press. Notice that the printing blocks are tightly locked into position on the press bed to keep them from moving while you work. In order to open up creative aspects of this type of press, I have developed an approach that does not require locking up the blocks. Rather, I use them in a freestanding manner, which works fine with a horizontal press bed as long as the blocks are of a certain size and proportion. For example, I have created multiplayer game-based pieces that use dice to determine how many blocks are chosen and where they are placed on the press bed. Each player has their own press with a unique color of ink. After the players have printed a predetermined number of pages, they swap printed pages with each other and run the game again, adding a new color to previously printed pages. The choreography of printing with the Vandercook press sometimes involves running the cylinder over the blocks without paper in order to place a layer of ink on them before printing. This is referred to as double inking and is only used in certain situations in commercial work. Because my improvisational approach requires that blocks be swapped out with each individual print, pre-inking the blocks results in stronger and more consistent imaging, which is helpful when the results are used as scores and will be viewed from a distance by the performers. However, among other parameters to be determined with dice, I plan to add the choice of single or double inking to future game designs. Eventually, as the parameter list grows in the games, I will add an assistant to each printer, a croupier, who will roll the dice and keep track of which die determines which parameter, allowing the printer to focus on the mechanical aspects of their instrument. The vertical format of the platen press, however, does not allow for the use of freestanding blocks. In order to achieve a similar degree of real-time image variability that the Vandercook offers, I use photopolymer plates that are held magnetically to the press. That allows me to move or change the images between each print. While considering the choreographies of printing, I became intrigued by the ensemble work of Roadworks, a yearly event hosted by the San Francisco Center for the Book. During the event, a wood-fired steamroller is used for printing with large and small format linoleum blocks. Each person has their role, but each of them must be fully aware of the entire process, just as performers do in a large ensemble improvisation. Even in this controlled situation, there's a surprising amount of improvisation required of each participant.
Wait till it's clear.